Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentleman History Month, the month in which we discuss the contributions that geeky gentlemen have made to history but that have been ignored by biased educational system, except not at all. I am your gracious host, Sid Part 2.
Hey, what's up? I'm that Matt Kid.
Yeah, that Matt Kid. He's my favorite geeky gentleman.
It's true.
Collect them all. No, Steve is here. Steve, I don't know the last time you and I did a solo ep. It has been a hot fucking minute. Anyway, so we're reviewing a movie from the past, a movie with some level of historical precedent, I suppose. It's not really a period piece because it's set concurrent with when it's coming out. But it's a nice, neat little snapshot. I'll allow it in History Month. Steve, what are we reviewing today?
All right, today we're reviewing the 1939 Frank Capra classic on the AFI list of top 100 films of all time, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
I'm sorry, this is not top 100 films. That's ridiculous.
No, literally, it is in the top 100 films of all time. It's like number 20-something?
Yeah, I'm sure it is on the list, but this is not top 100 film quality anymore. I'm sorry. This is clearly getting grandfathered in.
This is going to be an interesting conversation.
I mean, it's a good movie. I like it. It's not top 100 quality. I'm sorry.
But yeah, anyway, so we're reviewing Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It's one of two Frank Capra movies. I think only two Frank Capra movies in the top 100. The other one would be It's a Wonderful Life.
I mean, I could at least see the argument for that one because of how influential, but like this, I'm sorry, it's just, this is not top 100 film quality anymore. This is like, this is that level of like favoritism that like old movies get that like always end up on those lists, and it's like, I mean, they're good, but like, really? It's been fucking like 70, 80 years since this movie came out, and you still think it's the top 100 films? Really? You know how many films have come out?
There's definitely some historical precedent to it for sure, right? Like, this was in the first wave of films to be inducted into the Library of Congress. Mm-hmm. So it's just one of those things where it's like, it was a classic for a very, very long time. It was nominated for a shit ton of Academy Awards. It put Jimmy Stewart like definitively on the map because he's only like 30 in this. It put Frank Capra. Well, it actually didn't put Frank Capra on the map. Frank Capra was pretty successful even before this. But like it raised Frank Capra's popularity. I think one could argue the idea of Capricorn started with this movie. So like it's a very important movie for everyone involved. And like there are moments in this that I think are very, very iconic, but I would also kind of agree in that even if you go to other Jimmy Stewart movies, they do the same moments a little better.
Yeah, no, I'm like, it's a very good movie, but I'm just, there's so much more that has come out since this that I would put, I could easily make a list of 100 films that I think are better than this.
Jesus, okay.
I mean, it's not like, it's not a dig at it. It's just, I think a lot of movies like this get grandfathered into those kinds of lists, you know? Like Citizen Kane, I don't think stands as the greatest movie of all time anymore. Like, it might be, it's still good, but I think that's unfair. And it's just like, it's just earned that reputation, but it doesn't necessarily hold up any longer.
Well, and I mean, when we talk about like that list in particular, like you're looking at movies that if released today, or if anyone remembered them today, we would absolutely throw them off the list, like Lawrence of Arabia, The African Queen.
That's ridiculous. Like that.
Like, who thinks The African Queen is a top 100 movie of all time? I'm sorry, it's really bad. It's really bad.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm sorry to like open it like seeming so negative, because I do think this is legitimately a good movie. Don't get me wrong. It's just when I hear stuff like this, oh, this is number 20 in the top 100 films of all time. That list desperately needs updated. I'm sorry.
It has not been updated since 2007.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. That list is over a decade old.
To maybe like properly seed into this review, I guess I can maybe explain, because it's related to the top 100 thing of like why I picked this movie. So I've been obsessed with a podcast for like 2 months now called Unspooled, and that podcast got started with a film critic named Amy Nicholson and an actor named Paul Scheer, and they just decided to do a podcast talking about every movie on the AFI Top 100. And there was an episode on Double Indemnity that I listened to because it had an interview at the end with Ed Brubaker. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is actually a lot of fun. I kind of want to hear what they talk about with other movies. And 2 months later, I basically listen to this podcast every fucking day. It's a really, really good podcast. It's really interesting. But it gave me an itch to like watch classic movies, especially on the AFI list, because there were so many that are on here that are not good, that I have never seen, that I don't think anyone has ever heard of at this point. That are also really interesting to talk about both in historical context and in modern context. If you have Star Wars on the AFI list, there is no goddamn reason American Graffiti needs to be on there, for example. There's no reason Hitchcock needs 4 movies on the list.
Yeah, no.
Like that kind of thing. But I picked it because, one, it is definitely a History Month kind of movie because it is about politics. It does have some semblance of reality of what's going on at the time. But also because I was watching this one night, and I was really taken by like this idea that we as a culture are constantly under the assumption that the current generation has invented political cynicism. And it's a real like vibrant wake-up call in 1939 to be like, oh no, we really didn't. There is no generation alive right now that gets to take credit for being cynical about politics, and specifically American politics, because apparently we've been doing this since the dawn of time.
Oh, I mean, certainly. Like, that's the thing that I found interesting as I was watching through it, is because, like, you're set up, like, I think it's telling that the beginning of the movie has nothing to do with Jimmy Stewart's character, right? Like, he's not introduced till, like, a good 20, 30 minutes into the film, and maybe a little earlier.
Arguably, it's not even Jimmy Stewart's movie until the filibuster at the end.
I wouldn't say that. He's pretty central. Once he's introduced in the film, he's a pretty central character, and the rest of the movie kind of revolves around him.
I think he's the MacGuffin. He's the MacGuffin for the movie, but I don't think it's his movie. I mean, what's her name? Jean Arthur gets top billing over him at this point. I think, if anything, it is her movie, and it's Senator Payne's movie, and he's just kind of the rock being tossed around between them until the very end, where he does take sort of a central role.
Maybe. We could definitely talk about that more, but the point I wanted to make is he's not introduced till quite a bit into this movie, and before he's introduced, you're seeing just a very cynical take, and I think almost maybe a little too exaggerated take, but I don't know, it's the fucking 30s. We're not too far away from, like, Boss Tweed at this point. That would still be in, like, living memory. So, like, you're seeing this very cynical take on the operations of politics from the state level to the national level. And then you're introduced to Jimmy Stewart's character. And it is, if ever I've seen a representation of learning about American politics from what you were taught in school versus, like, actually experiencing it when you start paying attention to it. It is sad how timeless Jimmy Stewart's portrayal is within this film. I'll say a lot of things in this movie are pretty fucking dated. That, like, just fucking crushing disappointment that this man experiences is palpable.
It's legitimately kind of almost awe-inspiring at like how quickly his heart gets broken here. You know, like he's on the ground a day and everything goes bad.
Like, for real though, like that just, it's so sappy when he's like walking around the Capitol and he's looking at all the monuments and the little kid is reading Lincoln's address and he's just like, he's so like just enthralled by everything, and he's surrounded by people who are just so over all of it, like have long since accepted the bullshit, and then he's so sure about it up until the moment that he gets his shit wrecked, man. That went so bad, so quick for him.
Yeah. I mean, and it sets you up for that really well, I think, because of that intro where he's not there. Like, the opening of the movie is a senator dies. And immediately, the first characters you see are a governor who's in the pocket of a businessman trying to decide who they need to send to Washington to carry out their agenda. Like, there is no sugarcoating that shit. That is the opening of the movie.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I feel like if we made that movie now, or even if we made that movie 20 years after this, that would not be how this opens. I feel like in every other version of this script, it opens with, you meet Jimmy Stewart. He's a kind of Boy Scouty, Superman-y figure who's all aw shucks and Middle Western, and he gets the call to, I need to serve my country. And then arrives in Washington, and Act 2 is where you're like, oh, okay, this is not what I imagined at all, and you would kind of ease into that world. You do not get that here at all. Like,
we as the audience are quite a bit ahead of this character, which is interesting to experience.
We're ahead of the character, but I also think that we're like ahead of the curve of what an audience was willing to accept, and are even still kind of willing to accept in a certain degree, where this movie like had several blacklists. A lot of senators came out and said that this was trash and terrible and a bad thing, and it created quite a bit of stir. And I think that is in large part because it's not hiding just how accurate, if not, kind of melodramatic and exaggerated, this stuff is. Like, a senator dies and a governor needs appointment. Of course, he's going to ask the biggest donor in his office who he thinks he should appoint. It's one of those things where it's like, this is how it happens, but it's very difficult to watch that as an opening of a movie and be expected to feel sympathy for it,
And like the whole fucking scene with the governor sitting in his office and the businessman, John Taylor, right, is just in the other room, and they're sitting there with the senator deciding who's going to be nominated. And it's like, you always hear about like the guys in the smoky back rooms that make all the real decisions in politics, and it's like they're literally in a back room smoking, like it's, so you wonder, is that image because of this film, or is that just the image that like has so much lasting power that it's like it was the same thing that was discussed and conceived of back then,
This is not a subtle movie in any stretch.
So yeah, it's really interesting, and I think there's something so quintessentially American as far as like American exceptionalist politics about this film that's just really nothing has changed. The more things change, the more they stay the same, right? Like because I think this is like the attitude, the ideal, or just the culture you're taught as an American is, you live in a country where bad things happen, but the institutions themselves are framed as never at fault. It's always the people working within them not being, morally upstanding. And so as long as there is someone who is willing to be morally upstanding, the institutions will protect that voice above everything else, and that voice can win the day. And the thing that I think is, I hate to do it, but the thing that I think is most emblematic of that as both a reality of how people think in this country, and is almost like I think the worst thing about this movie is the ending, because my fucking god, it's almost like a Deus Ex Machina style ending, with the way that senator just turns heel in literally the last like 2 minutes of the film. Like, it's, in all fairness to the film, it does set up that guy is very morally conflicted about what he's doing throughout the entirety of the film, but like his turn comes literally seconds before the credits roll, and it is so like unbelievable in a modern context, and seems almost there as like, I don't even know if it's like, if propaganda is the right word, or just that is the mindset of your American who's politically educated.
Yeah, I mean, and not to start at the ending per se, but the ending is definitely the thing that like I am most conflicted about with this movie, because I really like this movie. I think this is a great fucking movie, and it's one of those things where it's like, I buy it, the emotions get me, and I think it delivers in a way where that ending feels satisfying, at least to me. But it creates a question in my gut about like, okay, I don't know how I feel about a portrayal of politics in this kind of light. You look at something like The West Wing, and The West Wing's an entertaining show. I really like The West Wing, at least for the first few seasons. Something gets kind of boring after a while. And The West Wing really is that kind of show that you were trying to describe there, of like, there are bad people in politics, and the institutions themselves are the things that can save us if you give someone a voice to kind of protect those values. The West Wing and Aaron Sorkin as a writer are very much of the kind of political mindset that at the 11th hour, you can appeal to the decency of your enemy to make the right decision because the country's ideals are bigger than them. And I feel like this movie kind of teeters on that for a very, very long time, and kind of goes over the edge in a way at the end I don't love, because it does this thing where it conflates political reality with political idealism that I think is kind of dangerous. I think, particularly in today's context, and I think today's context is what makes me more sour to this than maybe I would have been like 5 years ago. But in today's context, I think it's very clear that no sense of obligation to the ideals of the country is going to sway someone's conscience. That just doesn't happen. It doesn't matter how many impassioned speeches you give as a politician to do the right thing. A Republican will vote Republican, a Democrat will vote Democrat. There are some people here and there that will vote their conscience, but they were voting their conscience all the way through anyway. You're not getting like one of those, you're not getting that situation where like a person will stand up and say, look, I understand that Trump is Republican and you must support your party, but you must see that this is not the way.
I mean, like, literally, you had the fucking, the Capitol building was stormed, there was a literal attack on the fundamental, like, process of democracy, and instead of that being, like, a wake-up call of how horrific the, you know, bending to the cronyism and the lies and everything is, people still voted against Biden's confirmation, right? Like, that's
right. Yeah, it's that thing where it's just like that doesn't work. It never has. And in movies, I'm more inclined to believe it, because the idea is you don't need to change the system, you need to change the conscience of one person. And if you can buy the characters in the situation as real people, you can see why they would turn heel. The problem is a fully three-dimensional movie character is not transferable to a politician in real life. And meshing that idealism with practical reality can get kind of messy. And so I don't love that. But again, the thing that like really strikes me about this movie is it just fucking hits. You know, like I got to that ending and I was literally jumping at him. I seemed like, yes, he had a questioning of his faith. He admitted the truth. This democracy was saved. And like, it, you know, the fucker got me. It was
it's that like fucking, you know, 4th of July, like music swell of like like, you know, you can be like, oh, fuck America. And I hate our policies and our politics and everything. But then you get like the rockets, red glare. And you're like, it fucking, it hits into place, you know?
Yeah, there's just something about like Jimmy Stewart being passed out and the dude being like, "No, it was all alive." Like, yes, this is fucking rules.
Yeah, no, like it is a very emotionally satisfying movie. And here's my hot take. Get your oven mitts on, boys and girls. Here's my hot take. That's what makes it a very dangerous movie.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Is like, it's not this movie's fault. This movie maybe it probably isn't even the first. It's certainly the earliest example I can think of readily, but it's probably not even the first thing to do this, which is to take that idea of like the acceptance of corruption within the political system, but the notion that the ideals themselves, the law itself, the country itself, is on a strong foundation. This movie 100% falls into that trap. And so I don't really hold it against it for doing that. I think that is just a very inherently American thing. Like, denying your institution's fallibility is as American as apple pie. So like but it's those notions, it's those ideas, it's that like feeling of satisfaction that does fundamentally provide like this emotional tether to backing up the concept of the American institution that makes it so dangerous, because again, it's not the only thing to do it. Other things do it and continue it, and it's at that point where it stops becoming art and starts becoming very effective propaganda. And I don't know like where this movie teeters on that line, if it's like, you know, is it propaganda if you really honestly believe it when you're making it? And I'm like, maybe, but I don't know.
Yeah. This is where context again is, I think, kind of important, because Frank Capra was born in Italy, and his family came to the U.S. when he was like a toddler, and the way he talks about it, like coming to America was a religious experience for his parents. That the traveling to the ship from Italy to America was like the worst experience of their lives. They lived in a ghetto in the United States, and he worked several jobs trying to get his way through school. And like there was very much there's an element of a real American dream that happened with this dude, of this Italian immigrant that came here with nothing, that climbed and climbed and climbed and became who is now widely considered one of the greatest directors of all time. Mm-hmm. And this dude genuinely believes in that sort of idealized American idea of what the country can be. From his perspective, all of this is kind of reality. That the idea that this could happen is not a fantasy to him. And a lot of his movies get dubbed this idea of Capricorn because they're very corny, because they tend to have like very feel-good themes and stuff, and they tend to be very sort of fantastical in their presentation of genuine dangerous emotions. But I think what people miss when they throw him under the bus under Capricorn is that there is like a degree of like real grit and kind of seedy underbelly that he was portraying that just doesn't exist in film before him. And I think kind of gets lost in the shuffle when people start talking about like the feel-goodness of it. Like, It's a Wonderful Life is a feel-good movie where an angel saves a dude and everyone's happy at Christmas. But that's a dark movie. Mm-hmm. That movie is all about, like, how this dude is perpetually trapped in a town he fucking hates to the point of suicide, and then realizing that the greater good is the difference he made in people's lives. And, like, that's corny, but it's dark. Mm-hmm. And it's darker than a lot of the rip-offs of It's a Wonderful Life that ended up happening later. And I think this movie's very similar, where, like, the reality of what he thought America was coming in as an immigrant is there, and like the hope for the American ideals to persevere through is corny, sure, but the whole rest of the movie paints a really, really dark picture.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fair. Like, I think it is uncompromising in its portrayal of reality. Again, like I think it goes out of its way to portray a very jaded populace. Jimmy Stewart is the wide-eyed idealist, and everyone that sees him just thinks he's an idiot out the gate. The press make a fool out of him. He gets like pissed off and does the thing that like, you know, you want to do when you read the misleading headlines, is just punch the shit out of the reporters.
I fucking love that scene. I couldn't believe it was real for a second.
Yeah, no, that was pretty nuts. So like it definitely portrays like a very gritty reality. I think the thing is, it just falls into this trap of American exceptionalist media of like putting in that in the end the good will rise out, and like inherently, just like as removing it from the body politic of American institutions. If this were like a fictionalized take, or if you set this like 100,000 or like 1,000, 2,000 years ago in Rome or something, and like you change all the political elements, but like the same structure of the story is there, and like the same beats happen, you know, the honesty wins out, the good man triumphs. I don't have a problem with it. I honestly, like, all the stuff I'm saying of like, this is dangerous, that goes out the window the second you remove it from the existing American institutions, right? Like, that's the thing is functionally as a story, yes, 100%, you don't want Jimmy Stewart to fail here. That would be a very emotionally hollow and depressing film. This is Capra. It's not fucking Lars von Trier, right? Like, you don't want that to go that way. That would be a very emotionally unsatisfying story. But the fact that you're connecting it to the American ideal or the American institutions, makes you like start to have deeper questions, and it makes me in reality say, this is the problem. This is why this idea exists, is because films like this perpetuate these ideas. And so you can't say, like, even though like Congress on both sides of the aisle is constantly got like an approval rating in the fucking toilet, even though like everyone jokes about and hates politicians, you know, there's this shit going on in the back of their head, and so the politicians fucking play into it, and they play that like, yeah, no, Washington's corrupt, and I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna sweep out the thing, and fucking both sides just eat it up with like fucking spoon and a fork, just like fucking Goku, eat this shit up. And so like, you know, I like AOC. I agree with her policies. I think she's actually pretty fucking charismatic and charming. But I don't fucking want to, like, stake my whole existence on her. She could be playing me in the fucking background. I don't know. I'm not trying to, like, you know, believe in her that hard. Same thing with fucking Bernie Sanders or whatever. Like, I know at the end of the day, these people are politicians. They're playing into that idea of they're the Jimmy Stewart going to Washington. They're gonna weed out the corruption. They're gonna fight for the good thing no matter what. And I'm like, maybe they will, but like, I'm sorry, you know, how many times can you roll that fucking die?
Well, and I mean, to your point, right? Like, part of the problem here is you could very easily replace Jimmy Stewart here with AOC, with Bernie Sanders, with any number of like wide-eyed idealist politicians in real life, and start projecting onto them the demands of American idealism as if it's their burden to carry. But you know what? You could do the same thing with Trump. Mm-hmm. You could do the same thing with fucking any right-wing person who comes out of the woodwork and says, politicians are all corrupt, they're all terrible, I'm going to go in there and drain the swamp. I'm a real person that lives in the world and understands your plight. I understand the foundations of America. I'm going to go in and look at all of this terrible bullshit happening behind the scenes and fix it for you.
Yep.
It's very, very easy to say that, like, Jimmy Stewart's, like, sort of salt of the earth persona is one-sided, and it's not. It's purposely kind of vague in a certain way because it can be either. Now, if you know Frank Capra and you know his body of work, you know he leans left. You know he's done dozens of movies with Jimmy Stewart, in mind you, where he talks about a lot of left-wing things and he gets blacklisted for them. Jimmy Stewart has that speech in It's a Wonderful Life about capitalism and about bankers and about how People shouldn't have to wait until they're old and dead to be able to live in a good, affordable home. But you take that out for a second and just give me someone the basic setup of the movie. And this is every politician ever. It's not the left, it's not the right. It's every politician ever.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's so weird that disconnect that people have between not trusting politicians. Like, you'll hear jokes about politicians. This was fucking one. Politicians are like diapers. They should be changed often for the same reason. You know, like, that's, it's hilarious. You tell that in a room, it just instantly kills every time, man. But then, like, you see the fucking Bernie stickers, the AOC stands, or the fucking Trump hats, and the Ted Cruz fans and stuff, and it's constant. It doesn't matter what side you're on. People have a really hard time differentiating their feelings on politicians to their feelings on their politician, the one they like. And again, it's not that, like, I don't like some people. You talk to me, yeah, I'm 100%. I'll tell you all day that I'd vote for just about anything AOC puts forward, say with Bernie. I just don't give a fuck anymore. I'm that guy. I'll 100% with you every step of the way at this point. But at the same time, like, I fundamentally know that about myself. Like, I've got that check in my head, and so I'm not gonna be on the floor fucking crying if it comes out that, like, if we get a fucking, like, vid of AOC, like, secretly laughing with Donald Trump about their, you know, plan to stoke divisions in America, or whatever the fuck would happen. Like, at this point, I'm so goddamn cynical, I can't even trust my ideals, right? But that's the thing, is, like, this movie, and again, it's not just this, and I want to be very clear about that. I'm not holding this against just this film. I think this film does a very good job and tells a very good story, but it's the fact that it sets a precedent, and or not even sets, but it continues a precedent. I really got to try to think of something from before this that does the exact same shit. I think, like, a more modern example, I think Hamilton does this shit. Like, you know, that's the big hotness right now, right? And, like, Hamilton's doing the exact same thing that this is. It's like, it's acknowledging corruption in the institutions. It shows that with Jefferson and problems with Washington, and it shows the corruption inherent at the beginning of the country. But it's like, but Alexander Hamilton, he was a good, like, he fucked up in some ways in, like, his personal life, but, like, when it came to his ideals for the country and the nation he was helping to build, he was the guy. And I'm like, yeah, I feel it, but, like, was he though? Is the reaction I'm left with. And so this does the exact same thing. I'm like, 100%. Everything Jimmy Stewart says in this movie, I think everyone kind of agrees with it. Like, fuck, man, I would have liked to go to, like, fucking national camp. That would have been shit. That would have been the shit when I was a kid. Are you kidding me? I probably would have.
A good idea too. I kind of wish that was real.
Yeah, no, I kind of could. Like, I probably would have complained at it about the time, but, like, I don't know, man. Fucking just the whole nation goes to camp. That'd be fucking
it's
dope.
A great idea. It's so fucking wholesome.
I know. You're just like, yeah, you just give, like, $1 or $2 or whatever, you know, obviously inflation, but, like, you just give a little penance to go, whatever you can afford, and you get to, like, make friends from all across the country. You imagine, like, you wouldn't have those fucking New York types. They just don't have our values. Like, no, man, I went to camp when I was a kid. I made a friend from New York. I made a friend from California. I was from Alabama. We still keep in touch sometimes. I ran into one at the airport years later. It was crazy. We talked about all the fun we had at camp. Like, it'd be great. But, like, that's the thing. Is, like, everything that he sets up in the movie is fine. So I'm in this weird place where, like, I'm doing the thing I often complain about, where I'm like, well, don't talk about the real world of the thing. It's a work of fiction, you know, like, appreciate it as a work of fiction. And as a work of fiction, I think it is absolutely fantastic. But this has the unfortunate side effect of, or the unfortunate circumstance, I guess, of being a work of fiction that's set around very real things, which means it gets to be a little different in consideration at that point. It's one thing when someone's like, oh, I don't like this work of fiction on a sci-fi world where just fucking no human society has ever existed before because it feels too much like this real world problem. I'm like, yeah, I mean, sure, but like at the same time, it's a fucking sci-fi world where no real world things have ever existed before.
Right, and I mean, to your point, right? Like, you know, 2 U.S. presidents who love this movie? Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about how vague the characterization is, it's right there. I do want to say, though, like, I agree with you. I agree with you completely. That's why the ending kind of leaves me feeling kind of queasy and why I wanted to talk about it. And I do love the movie, but, like, that's the holdout. I do want to say, though, I think that there is a degree of nuance in this that makes me enjoy it more than something like Hamilton. The fact that this is not idealizing the process under which the United States governs in any way. I think it is actually legitimately really interesting that pre-House of Cards, you have a movie here that lets you see what the Senate floor is like. It's not the actual Senate floor. They weren't allowed to film in it. There's a recreation of the Senate floor. Is very open and direct about like how these chambers operate, and that Jimmy Stewart saving the day at the end is not because the ideals of the American institutions won out. It's that he basically abused the Senate laws to the point where they had no choice but to listen to him. And I think that's legitimately kind of good and kind of subversive even now.
Mm-hmm.
It would be one thing if we were using the picture of people's idea of how the government works to underscore that theme that you're talking about. But I think it's a little bit more forgivable and a little bit more interesting when you say, no, the whole thing is just kind of broken. And even if you're a good person in this mess, you have to use the mess.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fair. And like it's interesting to see some of the like cynicism brought through, because it's really easy to focus on the idealism here, but like I think the cynicism is highlighted incredibly well. Like, I think one of my favorite scenes is when he's trying to figure out how to get a bill passed and she has to explain it to him. You know, like just that whole scene of her breaking down the processes that a bill would have to go through at the time, which I have to imagine has only gotten more complicated now. Like, I think on paper it's the same, but like we all know it's more complicated now. And so like just that's a really interesting thing, and it's funny to see that go up against Stewart's optimism and this just like folksy wide-eyed brightness that he still has at that point in the movie, where like he's had his nose rubbed in the dirt a little bit, but he's still like instead of I think it's interesting that like he gets really mad at the reporters and he goes for blood as you would, and then the film does a really interesting thing, which is it has him listen to criticism from the people he's mad at. Because he's so mad at the reporters for treating him like a joke and misrepresenting him and stuff. And the reporters go, oh, no. We just pointed you out for what you are, which is a joke. You're just here you're a patsy. You're nothing. You're a wet blanket. You know, and to see him take that and go with it and accept that fact and then go in and start working on his own law was really, really good. I really loved the way that all worked out. Like the cynicism confronting the idealism with action, I thought was really fascinating.
Yeah, Jean Arthur's character, Saunders, the secretary in the Senate building for his office, I love her. I think she's fantastic. She's the one that sort of epitomizes the cynicism of being in Hollywood, because there is that sort of polarization here happening where Jimmy Stewart's the Midwesterner, wide-eyed American idealist who quotes Abraham Lincoln and has a rosy picture of how the American government works. And then you have Saunders, who is basically a city girl that has grown up in Washington, that knows how politicians play, she's in these chambers, and she just kind of plays along. And she sort of embodies that idea that a lot of politicians try to set up these white walls of what their ideals are, and over time they make compromises, and the white wall, it gets a little black smudge here, a black smudge there, a black smudge there, and it gets to the point where, is it a white wall with black smudges, or is it a black wall with shots of white?
Yeah,
and I think she...
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to transition, so go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, I think she plays that really, really well. And I like that she is instrumental in getting Jimmy Stewart back on track here, because he's not exactly Superman, right? Like, he's not above reproach. He's not above self-doubt. Every scene we see him in, he's very much self-doubting. He's ready to go home. And she feels for him as a person before she really necessarily feels for, like, the ideals that America stands on. Like, she feels bad that this guy came here and became so broken. And it just kind of happenstance that the ideals kind of come with the package of who he is. I like that she's the one feeding him Senate bylaws and stuff and telling him what to do, and I think their banter back and forth is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. No, I really like all that stuff, and you just talking about the white wall thing, I think was really interesting, because you basically get that scene with the senior senator from his state.
Yeah.
And the way that, like, the guy describes is like, I've done good for our state, right? Like, you agree with me. You've been happy with what I've done for our state in, my 30-year career. And he's like, yeah, I really do. Well, sometimes I've had to compromise to do it. And, like, it really is that, like, Jesus in the desert scene, man. Like, it just fucking hits. Where it's like, you're 100% with him. And, like, you, as a realist, I think you kind of accept the reality of what he's saying, that it makes sense. That, like, he's compromised and he's done things and accepted things that he might not love, but he's gotten things that are arguably great. And, like, I think it's smart to leave it vague, because he could be talking about fucking nothing, or he could be talking about, like, people's lives, Like, I really like the way that whole scene's presented.
Yeah, I really like that, his character. I think on a rewatch, his performance really comes alive, because you meet him and Jimmy Stewart in the train together, and Jimmy Stewart talks about how he knew his father and how they used to be lawyers together, and that, like, a lost cause was the only cause worth fighting for. And when you know what's coming with the dam and his compromises and all that stuff, you can, like, really, really see the uncomfortableness in his performance that really shines through. And their argument when he finds out what's going on is great, but also just, like, that dude's ability to play the game with Jimmy Stewart about using his daughter to take him out of town so he isn't there when the Senate is debating the dam bill. I love his character. I think he's really, really interesting. And I think, again, like you said, it's kind of vague, so it can be anybody. But I think that dude's portrait of being a U.S. Senator is probably more accurate to what goes on in real life than anything else in this movie. I think that dude is 90% of actionism.
Mm-hmm. I think so. I think that's fair. Like, as annoyed as we get at these figures, right? Like, there is the fact that, like, Ted Cruz probably just, like, he's ambitious as fuck, but, like, for what he's been sent to do, he's probably doing a good job in the eyes of the people that sent him there, right? Like,
yeah.
Fucking Lindsey Graham had that whole thing of, like, you could kill Ted Cruz dead on the floor of the Senate and no one would testify against you. And, yeah, they fought for him to be president. Like, and, that's probably all true, but Ted Cruz has won re-election so many fucking times in Texas. Like, he's popular for where he's from, and so you kind of realize that, like, the Senate's built to be fucking dysfunctional. It's built to be kind of a mess. It's built to give outweighted power to certain individuals at certain times. You kind of see in that with, like, like Joe Manchin right now, right? Like he's the name in Congress, in the Senate right now, that's like constantly coming up because he's a Democrat, but he's from a right-leaning state, so he's walking this fucking tightrope trying to make sure that the people in the state are happy, but he's also like this key vote for anything that the Democrats want to pass with this like razor-thin majority. So it's just like, it's kind of built to give outweighted power to those kinds of guys and those kinds of faces from time to time. Or fucking constantly, one of the two. And so like you kind of get that sense of like, oh yeah, well, maybe what I'm doing's corrupt, or not even necessarily corrupt. Maybe it's just fucking shady and kind of uncomfortable. But like, I'm doing good for my state in some way, shape, or form, aren't I? And it's sometimes it's hard to argue because you don't really know the context of the different states, and you kind of realize that like, especially now, America's gotten like way too big for the institutions that created it. Because those interests, those values have gotten to be so incredibly disparate. Like, I love that like all of my opinions on American politics have been summarized much better in tweets by other people. Was fucking best thing I ever saw. Is like, well, the founders designed the country to grow slowly and for, you know, the rural states to have, you know, more power and not be like left behind by the bigger populous states. And they go, yeah, but what if I told one of the fucking founding fathers that 40 million people lived in LA? They'd be like, well, what? 4 million people live where? It's a very like interesting thing. It's like some of the anachronisms of this film. I don't know if that's the right word, actually. That was a big word. I'm not 100% certain what it means. Some of the like remnants, I guess, of this film are things that I found particularly interesting. If you don't mind transitioning a little bit, like,
yeah,
because they talk about 96 senators, because fucking Alaska and Hawaii weren't states yet. So like, that's really amusing to me. Like that.
Bitch.
Yeah, it's really funny. And like, so that one stood out to me because they kept saying like 96. I'm like, all right, I'm either fucking stupid and I had to like really think it through for a second there because I had to like look at the date the movie came out. And so that was pretty funny.
I just didn't know how the Senate worked than to assume that there were actually 2 less states for a minute.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, I was like, 96 doesn't sound right. I thought it was 100, but you know what? It's in the movie. It's probably right.
No, the answer may surprise you. But like, so that one stood out to me. The one that just cracked Haley and I up while we were watching this for like a good 5 minutes, we're just laughing about this, was it gets to the big climax of the film where it's like this race between Stewart's like Newsboy Legion, thanks Jack Kirby, and the fucking like the Taylor Machine, as it's called, and just the like they're trying to publish papers and Taylor's trying to drag his name through the mud in the public and not let any facts get out and just use his influence to grip the nation, or grip the state rather. And just like we're watching it and they're showing like the kids are working so hard in this print, like a homemade print mill, and they're like working until they're tired, they're working through the night, and Haley goes like, yay, child labor. And I look at her and I go, you didn't see the fucking kids escorting senators around in the goddamn building? Like, holy shit.
Yeah, man. Now if you want that job, you got to be an Ivy League educated kid.
I know, right? But like that would fucking kill me. He's like, hey, child labor. I'm like, yeah, fucking child labor in the halls of the Senate. And it's just fucking wow.
Speaking of the Newsboy Legion, I do actually want to get your take on this part, because I hear people talk about it, and I read a couple of like more modern reviews on the movie, and either I need to watch the scene again, or I think people are missing what actually happened with them. Because a lot of the reviews I read, and a lot of like the sort of newer think pieces on that have been around the last 5 years, talk about how Jimmy Stewart sees the news from his home state about how they don't want him to do this filibuster, and everyone's like, and see, this is what happens to good politicians when fake news shows up and all of these lies get spread and all that, and like how all of these letters are like Twitter bots just making shit up, and I don't think that's what happened. As far as I can tell in that movie, Taylor owns the newspapers and the radios. He's spreading anti-Smith messages and propaganda, and those are real letters from real people in the state who only consume Taylor media, and they think he's doing a bad job. It's not that it's manufactured or fake or Twitter bots or whatever. Like, those are actual people who hate him, and they hate him because they just don't know better.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's a fairness, because I think that is, like, legitimately fake news. Like, I think Twitter bots is a weird place to take it, because you don't even need to get into Twitter bots. Like, real people do this, right? Like, Fox News publishes a thing about fucking, or not even Fox, let's go, like, more fringe with it. The fucking, this is quaint, this was 5 years ago, Steve. You remember in 2016 when the guy brought a gun to the pizza place because he wanted to investigate the child sex dungeon? You remember this?
Like years ago.
Yeah, but like this is a thing. This was a thing that happened. Is
yeah,
people, bots or not, but let's just go with people. Like I think what Taylor's doing, they call it a machine. I don't think it's super unfair to call it bots, because they're just typing. It's just a bunch of people typing up whatever Taylor tells them to type up, and people are consuming that fake news, that filtered media, and then they're just taking it as fact and running with it and getting really, really ultra pissed off because it's the trusted news source that they have, whether that's your Fox or InfoWars or whatever the fuck it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing that really has bite for me, is that I think in a lot of ways, and specifically in like a lot of liberal media criticism about this movie, I think there is this sort of assumption that the letters that he receives at the end, they're all bad and they're all lies, and he shouldn't listen to them because those people don't know what the fuck they're talking about and they don't matter. And that it's a tragedy that he decides to acquiesce to the trolls. And I think that framing is really disingenuous, because I think actually what's happening here is, like you said, these are real people being fed a very specific kind of spin, but they have sincere feelings about it. That the people in his state, they do actually hate him. Those letters are all real.
I want the epilogue of this movie so fucking bad.
I know, right? Same. There is actually more footage that happens after this, and all of it got cut, and I can talk about that in a sec if you want, because it's interesting. But the thing that like really gets me about that scene is that like his home state does actually hate him. Like all of these people do actually hate this dude, and that's the sad thing. I think it's too easy to be like, no, he should be above the trolls, because they're not trolls. They're like legitimate people.
Yeah, no, I mean that's the hard thing, right? Of like, and this is what's frustrating, because, hi, I'm a lefty and I live in a very red state, and so like it's really frustrating because ideally, your senator, whether they're with your party, with your branch of the aisle or not, is elected to represent you. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat and they're a Republican. They are still supposed to listen to you, take you seriously, and represent you on the floor. So if you're upset with them, if you're a Democrat, ideally, you should be writing your senator every day, every time they make a vote that you don't agree with. I'm not shaming anyone. I don't fucking do that. But like that is the ideal of what you should be doing, right? But it's completely impractical. It's ridiculous. It's impossible to live up to. But like, even when you hate what your senator is doing, they're still supposed to be representing you, so you have a right to cast your voice. And so it's two-sided, because let's say you're a lefty being represented by a left-leaning government. So you're fucking in Vermont and you're being represented by Bernie Sanders and you're a socialist, and Bernie Sanders is proposing socialist legislation, and he's proposing and voting for and doing socialist things, and you're happy and you're glad he's doing it. Well, there's fucking Vermont. It's actually a very diverse state, politically speaking. And so the maybe there's someone who's pretty right-wing there, and they're really unhappy with Bernie Sanders, and they're like, they don't want him doing that thing. They're supposed to write in and tell him not to do that, and to some level, maybe it shouldn't change his mind, but maybe it should influence his decisions on how hard he wants to go. And that probably drives you crazy as a lefty. You're like, no, we got you there, you do our thing. But then put it on the other thing. Put yourself in my shoes. I'm a lefty, I'm being represented by a Republican. I would really like it if they would just fucking listen to one letter that I've sent in. You know, I got real discouraged on it real quick when I sent in things saying, do not do this, I am pissed, stop it. And all I got for it was, thank you for your letter. And then 3 months later, are you concerned about the teaching of critical race theory in our schools? Because I am too, and I'm going to do everything in my power to fight against it for you. I'm like, no, you fucking goddamn, you didn't read the fucking letter, you bitch. But like, on my side of things, I would like them to actively listen to it, and if not like change your mind on it, at least maybe not push as fucking hard for the crazy shit that you're trying to push for. But that's the thing, it's like, yeah, I don't fucking write a letter every day. And no one fucking does, unless you're a goddamn nut. And then you're gonna get ignored because you're a fucking nut writing a letter every day. They'll probably open it every day with their morning coffee to laugh. And
I mean, there were a lot of exposés at this point where they interview like Senate staffers and stuff, and it's effectively been proven that 90% of the letters that get sent in just get thrown out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they get the return address, send a thank you note, and just throw the letter out.
Which is insane.
Yeah, man. That's where we've gone. Now, okay, to be fair, I'm sure that in the 30s and in the 40s and maybe into the 50s, letter writing was more serious and prolific. But by this point, I don't think that's surprising that they just throw them out.
Oh, no, not at all. Like, I'm not surprised by it. That's the legislation I want. Because, like, what the fuck do senators do anyway? Like, this movie makes the point. They're not the ones actually writing the bills. That's, like, legal minds, and they're like, giving the direction, and the legal minds are writing it, and then they're introducing it, and giving input along the way.
I like that the movie brings that up, too. Mm-hmm. I love that, like, well, lawyers actually handle most of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, so, like, I really like that scene. So, fucking senators aren't actually writing the legislation by hand anyway. So fucking what else do you have to do? That's the legislation I want. Senators must actually read and give actual response to every letter they receive from their constituents. I'll be fair that if it comes from outside of your state or your congressional district, you shouldn't have to read that. But from your constituent... do you know how good that would be, Steve? It's like a legal requirement. You cannot be a senator if you do not respond to a single letter. Like one letter doesn't get responded to within like a period of 1 year, and so you lose your fucking Senate seat.
Oh man, that would definitely change the fucking landscape, that's for sure.
It'd be like crack, man. Dear Mike Pence, use a bitch. Signed, Ian Harrington.
So to your point earlier, just real quick while we're here, there is an epilogue to this movie.
Okay.
There's a bunch of deleted scenes after he wakes up, and him and Saunders go back to his hometown, and his mother like makes them dinner. And there's a big parade for him, and they get married and started a family. There's like legitimate like 20 more minutes of this movie, and all of it got cut because basically he thought like the pacing got screwed up at that point, and like the movie had effectively ended at the end of the filibuster. Mm-hmm. If you watch the trailer, you can actually see some of that deleted footage, and a lot of it a lot of it's still there, but some of it's kind of been lost at this point. But there is like an entire like epilogue to this movie that exists that, from what I understand, basically undercuts everything good about this movie.
Oh no, really? like how else does it undercut it? Like, besides just giving it resolution, or does like Taylor go to jail at the end? Like, what happens? No, Steve, like, I'm serious. What happens?
I mean, you want to see like a big family parade and a picnic and like seeing Taylor brought to task, it's there somewhere.
Okay, as long as that's there. I mean, like, shit, I need that. Okay. No, you like legitimately had me worried that like Taylor was gonna fucking get off or some shit. I was like, oh no. Give me the feel-good ending. Like, it's earned it by that point. Certainly, it's just like a story beat. It's really funny to have like all of my problems with the movie be basically solely centered on the real world, like, fallout from films like it. You know, I don't think I've had that experience super often.
I mean, and I think that's another reason why this is a really interesting movie to talk about, and why I think it's fun for History Month, because I just feel like there's definitely a bit of cognitive dissonance that goes on with this, right? Where, like, it's a really good movie. It's a really well-made movie. It's slightly over 2 hours for 1930, which is a long-ass fucking time for a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Even by today's standards, it's honestly pretty long, but it doesn't feel that way. It's this very well fine-tuned craft movie. Deleting certain scenes makes sense. The performances are good. It's really emotionally rich and really engaging. And then you're just kind of left to wrestle with, is this a picture of the world you really want to have? And I don't know.
Mm-hmm. What I find interesting to talk about with this is that, again, that distinction between, like, it's a film that deals with politics and it is saying a very particular thing. But I think the thing that I'm still, like, just getting caught up on is that idea, because it is so tied, like, inherently to the political statement it's making, that you cannot divorce it from the real world politics it's talking about and has had a lasting impact on.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas something like The Dark Knight, even though it's got like political allegory and stuff in it, you can still enjoy it just as a Batman story. You can turn off the part of your brain that's like introspecting into the politics of it.
Yeah.
But even when you analyze the politics of it, it's more making a case for like the general idea as opposed to the real world circumstances, right? So like everyone talks about Dark Knight and it's like a loose allegory for the Bush wiretapping thing, right? But like the allegory itself, the case it makes is very different from the Bush thing in reality. So like you can talk about it with a level of nuance, not that you can do that on the internet, but the possibility exists maybe with two people. You can talk about it with a level of nuance where it's like, okay, ignoring the Bush thing, say you're in the Christian Bale Batman scenario, you're fucking Morgan Freeman in this instance, and you've been asked, okay, I've made a machine that taps every single cell phone in Gotham, and I need to use it to catch one guy. And after that, I will destroy it. I promise. You gotta be crazy not to go along with it in that very specific set of circumstances, right? Like, that's the situation the movie paints, is like the action itself is terrifying, but like the circumstances justify it. And like, I feel like that's the thing that's the distinction that gets lost, is you can't really talk about this movie within its own circumstances, because its own circumstances are very real world circumstances. And so it's just like a weird thing to kind of discuss.
Yeah, I mean, it's a movie that wants to say something about our political reality and does so for its time as accurately as it can. And if that's the case, then it becomes something that's like in the political conversation, and you have to evaluate it on those terms. And that's where it gets kind of sketchy, where it's like, it's making an argument about our political reality, and is it a good argument? And the answer is, it's almost like the Community episode where they do the debate club, where it's like there are good arguments and there are good presentations, and sometimes the good presentation can outweigh the content of the argument. And that's kind of where even I'm sort of left with this one, where it's like, I think it's a really good movie, but I have a really hard time being like, this is the thing I show people who are politically engaged to get them into movies, or vice versa. You know, like this is this is a political movie that you do not actively seek out for political reasons. There are other movies for that, which is a shame, I think, because again, it's got reality to it, and again, I think there's bite. Like there is more bite to this than I think there is to other Aaron Sorkin things. There's more bite to this than The Newsroom. There's no more bite to this than Hamilton or some of The West Wing. But it's hard to like parse that if you're not already, like you and I are in this conversation, pretty tapped into what's going on in the world right now and have the ability to kind of divorce it from that. Like this should not be Baby's first political movie, though. I'm saying.
I really like. Can you talk more about some like the particularly leftists' takes on this movie? Because I imagine the conservatives fucking love this thing and eat it up to death. But like, they do now. They didn't at the time.
They did not at the time. No. From what I understand, I did an ass ton of research for this because I actually have gotten really into this fucking podcast now. So, but. At the time, the movie came out. It premiered basically in Constitution Hall as a press junket, and after it was screened for like basically half the Senate, and all of them hated it. Like literally every single one hated it. It was banned in Nazi Germany by Hitler, but it was also banned in U.S. allied countries at the time because it presented a picture of America that made its allies concerned. So like the argument in France and stuff was that like, we like America, we don't like the idea that people think of America in this way, whether or not it's true, so we don't want you to watch the movie. Which is weird when you think about the idea that like the Allies and the Axis powers both agreed that this is a movie that no one should watch. Because it feeds on both sides of that. Over time, up until basically after Kennedy, is when like politicians started to kind of turn more around on it.
So the generation that grew up with it.
Yeah, the generation that grew up with it that basically saw themselves as Mr. Smith are the ones that started to like it. The ones who were in office at the time thought it was terrible. But that's when you get like Richard Nixon loves it, Ronald Reagan loves it. Most sitting presidents that I found all said that it was great on some level. Now there's basically a kind of split. There's a Jacobin article on the movie, and Jacobin's pretty left-wing, and it basically trashes it and rakes it through the coals because it presents an idealistic picture of American democracy. It completely whitewashes how laws and stuff are passed. It's too quote-unquote Capricorny. And it's basically a relic of the 1930s that was overly idealistic even for its own time, which I think is 90% just false, but besides the point. And then now the right wing actually really, really loves this movie. And if you go on Breitbart, if I can remember Breitbart, there's actually an article, I don't remember who it's by, but it's another one of those, like, one of the bigger writers on that site. There's an article around the time Trump was running for president in 2015, basically comparing Trump to Mr. Smith. And the title of the article was something like The Don Goes to Washington or something like that. Like, it just parodies the movie title. Now this is one of those movies where the political conversation on it has kind of mellowed out in the last few years, but the right has really, really embraced it because the right has embraced this mentality that they are the outsiders coming in, and the left hates it because they think it's too liberal. And the liberals were in love with this movie when they grew up on it, and have since kind of migrated to the West Wing and Hamilton and that kind of stuff. It's an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
With kind of Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting conversation because it's kind of all over the place. Um, I think, of course, as most things, there's very little nuance in these conversations. There's a lot of stuff that I've seen people criticize this movie for, and even praise it for, that I do think is just kind of just straight up false. The Jacobin article saying that this was too optimistic for 1939 is just straight up full of shit. Like, no, not even close. Do you know what 1939 was like at the movies? Have you seen a 1939 movie? Have you seen a Frank Capra propaganda movie from the 1930s? This is not too optimistic for 1939. That's literally bullshit. But then the right wing has very similar things too, where they spin the Taylor thing as if it's the liberals buying out the media. And the text of the movie doesn't really support that either. Now, to be fair, it's kind of vague, but it's not as vague as everything else. Like, I think it's pretty clear that this is a rich industrialist businessman buying up politicians to do his bidding. It's not the same sort of equivalency that they want to make.
I mean, it's, again, people stretch and bend to make anything fit whatever they want it to be. It's much easier to make things fit our preconceived notions, and it's hard to talk about it because I know I'm guilty of it too. Like, it's impossible not to be guilty of, because it's just how the human brain fucking works, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I know I'm guilty of it too, but it's just amazing to see, like, the willful misinterpretations of things. And so, you know, Alfie and I always talk about, like, oh, fucking Dragon Ball fans just cannot read. They've clearly never read Dragon Ball because they couldn't come away with these fucking takes, but they do. And it's just, like, a lack of engagement, a lack of, you know, media literacy that comes into these things. But it's always there. It's with everything. People don't know how to engage with media, and instead they turn it into, this is saying what I want. And so, like, you know who I think is the greatest victim of just that on, like, a fundamental level? I think it's J.D. Salinger. I think humanity owes J.D. Salinger a fucking apology for, like, so willfully misinterpreting his work.
Catcher in the Rye is not the insane right-wing novel people make it out to be, I don't think.
No, I mean, I think it's just fucking, like, it's a broody lonely boy book, right? Like, that's really all
terrible.
it is. And just, like, the fact that it's been used as, like, this is the thing that taught me that I should murder John Lennon. It's just, like, it is literally that mentality, and it's just with everything. You know, fucking, like, okay, let's see, we should talk about, like, all the fucking weighty shit in the world now, and it just to bring it back to something goofy and silly, because I was trying to wrap my head around this, and I think this will be the thing that we end on, because it's so silly and just completely removed from everything.
Oh no, I'm ready.
It was a screen grab rather, of Goku fighting Vegeta in GT, the baby arc fight.
Yeah.
And it's captioned with baby Vegeta versus Goku, the only time Vegeta legit won a fight between the two. And I'm like, what the fuck?
I mean, even if you count baby, Goku's never won a fight against Vegeta.
It's so fucking, like, it's just, dude, alright. So, like, first of all, the level of hoops you have to jump through to say that Vegeta, like, hacked his way through beating Goku in the Saiyan Saga is just already, like, through the roof. Like, I couldn't help myself. I read the comments. I know I shouldn't have, Steve, but I did.
Do you remember that time in the Saiyan Saga where Vegeta broke his fucking legs and just left him there dying, and then only didn't kill him because other people showed up?
Right, but like here's the argument that I saw, Steve, legit, is, well, Goku didn't go into it fresh like Vegeta did. Vegeta had a whole other Saiyan fight Goku beforehand. I'm like, he used Kaioken, like, once, just times, like, 1, and it was just to go fast. Like, Goku's not breathing heavy when they start that fight. Like, he's good, man. It's like Goku fought Vegeta after doing, like, 2 push-ups. Like, that's it.
Yeah, dude, guy was just fucking stretching before the fight.
I
Man.
know, like the whole point of Goku taking on Nappa is to show just how boss he is. Like Nappa is not an exhausting part pre the Vegeta fight. If it was, Vegeta wouldn't have fought him. So
imagine like the ego boost you'd have to give Nappa by saying it's your fault that Goku couldn't beat Vegeta.
I know, right? So like, all right, so ignoring all the shit about the Saiyan saga, and I think you and I have had the discussion about the Majin thing of like how much of a win it should count as. Ignoring that, all right. Baby Vegeta versus Goku. You mean when he fucking got all of the other Saiyans on Earth together to help him fight you? Like, that's the legitimate win? I don't
He
understand.
lost against baby Vegeta like 3 times. Literally straight up 3 times.
And that's the one with, like, the most hacks. That's the one where I'd be like, yeah, no, those ones aren't fair because Baby stacks the deck every time. Like, that's the one where I'd give him, but, like, fucking craziness, man. So, yeah, let's just end on that. People are media illiterate. Yourself, myself, the listeners included. None of you know what the fuck you're talking about. You're all just confirming your own biases.
So true.
And just accept it and move on. And like there's nothing you can do about it. The best you can do is be aware of it, and then that's it. So if you just accept it, then it's fine. But just you're just aware of it now. That's all you can do. I think that's a good place to wrap up and just go under ratings, unless you have anything else you really want to get out.
I think there was like one thing, but I'm kind of forgetting, so we're fine. We're good.
Okay, all right. I'll go ahead and go first. I will give this 4 out of 5 broken marriage proposals. I'm really happy that we didn't get the epilogue where they get married because, goddamn it, I like headcanon that she did end up marrying that other guy.
I know, that was so fucking funny to me. He's just like so drunk and he's like, I'm gonna go get married. Oh, that's good shit.
And the only reason I'm taking a point off is just because of the real world implications. It's a very good film on its own. If this was about Rome, I'd totally give it 5 out of 5.
I will give this 5 out of 5 brutalized newspaper children. They were just fucking beating the crap out of those kids. It was so funny.
Oh, no.
It's supposed to be this big corny thing of like, look how evil these men are. They're beating up children, but it's just funny.
Oh no.
It's fucking episode 3 with the lightsaber and the younglings. It's just so funny. Mr. Smith, what are we going to do?
Oh no. Okay.
Okay, I'm good. I really like this movie. I think this is a fantastic movie. 100 greatest movies of all time, I don't know per se, but I think it's legitimately great.
Yeah, I mean, I think it deserved a place on that list at a time.
In
But
1997, yeah.
Yeah, in 1930s, up until I might even give you till the turn of the century. I might, but it's just
there's only 2 lists. So there's the AFI Top 100 from 1997, and then 10 years later did an anniversary list. That's the 2007 list, and they haven't updated it since.
No, but I'm just saying, like, in a objective list, like not even theirs.
Yeah.
Just like if someone were to legitimately try it now from scratch, watch every movie that's ever been made.
Sure.
I could see it like before the turn of the century, maybe, but after that, we've come too far. In 21 years, we've come very far in just the making of film. I'm sorry.
Well, and I think the other thing is just Frank Capra and Jimmy Stewart have made a lot of good movies. They've made a lot of good movies together, and the question is just, is this the best Frank Capra, Jimmy Stewart movie of all time? And I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fair.
I think that's still It's a Wonderful Life. I think It's a Wonderful Life. It's a longer movie. It's a better paced movie. And I think it's a more timeless movie than even this is.
I think that's fair. It's got a better moral and stuff. I don't feel wrong watching it in any way.
Yeah, I'm not conflicted about it. That's just a good fucking movie.
All right, I think that's a good place to wrap up. Next week begins holiday month because we're all inclusive here. So if anyone wants to pick a Kwanzaa movie, go right ahead.
I'm gonna pick the Lobo Hanukkah special. Thank you very much.
Okay. So I don't know. Probably just give it to Matt or Alfie. We'll have a surprise topic for next week. I think, Steve, since it's just you and I here, let's do this now when we can get consensus and can't end up with a dead even heat. Do you think we should do holiday month like we do horror month, where it's just all reviews until like the last episode?
Personally, that's what I would prefer.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of fucking holiday movies. Like, there's an ass ton of holiday movies. And if we did 4 reviews a year for 10 years, that still would not cover the gamut of what's widely considered the best Christmas movies of all time.
Yeah, and it's just harder to come up with like topic discussions around holiday stuff.
Like last year, I love their discussion on Snow. I have nothing against our conversation on Snow, but like when you're saying Snow as a topic, you're kind of scraping.
Yeah, and like I think we can still like get stuff out of it, but it's just it's a harder well to mine. That's a terrible metaphor.
I think you also get like veto power on this. If there's like a really good topic, then we could probably break it in the middle of the reviews. But I would personally prefer just doing movie reviews.
Yeah. I think I want to make that change because we've tried it over the last couple of years and it just gets really difficult. Like the first 2 were like, yeah, this is really working, and then they're like, fuck. We wasted like 2 to 3 years worth of topics. Shit.
That was just in 1 year.
All right. Well, I think that'll do it. Everyone, thank you so much for watching this year's installments of Geeky Gentleman History Month. This is still honestly my favorite time of the year. I love doing these topics and reviews and stuff. Until next year, I am the philosopher.
And I am the political exile.
And we are your Geeky Gentlemen. And we will be discussing things.